Yeah, sorry, this is like confusing, right? This is not the closing remarks. We will do that in 30 minutes and I'll be back. I'm so sorry you have to hear from me this much. You would think with 7 other authors on this paper, someone else would be up here, but here I am on behalf of everybody else, 2 authors from Ipsos and 6 of us from Google, talking about how people felt about AI affecting their future. At Google right now, and maybe in many of the places you work or in the conversations you're having, you might be hearing a lot about AI. We are too. And we find that it is interesting to think about AI and to ask people what they are thinking about AI. And when we do that, people bring up many different topics. They don't just talk about privacy, like some of us maybe would prefer or hope, but they in fact talk about how AI is going to impact healthcare, education, sustainability, all sorts of things that AI is going to have some impacts on. In some past work we did, we found that something between 90 to 95% of people around the world believe that AI is just going to have huge impacts on society in the future. And we decided for this work to dig more into privacy. Specifically, we asked participants, in the next 10 years, what do you think will happen in your country, we filled in the blank, because of AI? And for the privacy question in particular, their choices were more privacy, less privacy, no change, or they don't know. And we did this in 10 countries that are on this map. And 2 important caveats here. One is that this data was collected about 2 years ago now, so in the summer of 2021, which means this was before ChatGPT was widely a media darling. This is before the sort of generative AI revolution that's happening now. The other caveat is this was before Russia invaded Ukraine. If that had already happened, we probably wouldn't have done this survey work in Russia, but Russia is one of the countries in this sample, and so we do have Russian responses, and so when you see these here, take that into account. All of this was conducted in language through online panels, which means that everything you'll be seeing throughout the rest of this talk is in translation. These are the English translations that we used, though a lot of this work was done in language, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So for one example, if we go back to that question we asked, what's going to happen because of AI in 10 years in Germany, our respondents in Germany, about 1,000 people there, said about 10% said that they would have more privacy because of AI, the optimists. About 56% said they would have less privacy, and the rest said they weren't sure. And if we sort of take out those no change and don't knows and sort of say, okay, we're not going to count those people, they don't have strong opinions about what AI is going to do, we can sort of think of the rest of this as a ratio or of about 0.18. And if we look at this across all of the countries we surveyed, across all 10 countries, privacy was generally thought by about 49% of the respondents to be made worse by AI, and by about 22% to be made better, which means you know that Germany was a little bit below the sort of optimistic average here, for a ratio of 0.45. If we look across all of those other categories of things that I talked about, you actually see that privacy here has the strongest ratio of negative impact to positive impact. Which means when we look across the responses of these 10,000 people, we see that privacy is one of the things they think will be most negatively impacted by AI, as opposed to things like education or healthcare or transportation or general quality of life. In fact, across our surveys of AI that we've been doing for several years now, and across these 10 countries and others, we actually see that people are quite optimistic about AI. Even when there are things they're continually worried about, things like job creation and job loss, things like privacy, things like the lack of personal relationships or the lack of interacting with humans, we see that overall, they're quite positive about AI, which means privacy is one of these points of sort of really noted weakness. And this gives us something to respond to and think about. So to dive deeper into this question of how AI is going to impact privacy, we asked directly, in what ways will artificial intelligence, or AI, affect privacy in the future? Please be specific. And we collected open-ended responses from just over 9,800 people. And working with our partners at Ipsos, we actually coded each of those responses in language. So if they were originally written in Russian, they were coded by a Russian speaker, based on a code book of 368 codes. This means we had about 100,000 words where people were saying, this is how I feel AI is going to affect privacy, about 10 words per response overall. Of course, some of these are very short, others are much longer, and we assigned over 24,000 codes. For reviewers out there who respond to my papers with things like, why didn't you have 2 coders and just calculate an iterator reliability, that's a lot of codes. And there's no grad students I'm subjecting that to. Also, we use in-language experts, so we use some different checks around how to make sure this data is valid, and those are described in the paper. Overall, if we look at the overall response quality, about 75% of all of those respondents express something that we think of as a privacy statement. So 18% still said something that was like an I don't know. You know, we said, how will AI affect privacy in the future? And they were like, I don't know, it won't. And about 8% were sort of other unrelated answers. These include things like, you know, the robots are going to come kill us all. And I was like, that's great to know, but that's not actually about privacy. And so it doesn't get coded into this expressed as a privacy statement. From that 75% of responses, we looked across the codes, we did some bucketing, we read much of this, and we put together 4 different themes that we saw coming out around privacy. I am going to go through each of these 4 themes relatively quickly because I do want to leave some time for questions, but all of the quotes that I'm showing in the next few slides are in the paper. You can go back and look through them in more detail. So this first theme is data at risk. Overall, participants, respondents felt that AI needs lots of data to be successful. And so it's going to be gathered from multiple devices, it's going to be cross-linked, it's going to be aggregated, it's going to be made available online, and this making it available and putting it together makes it vulnerable to misuse and hackers. We have quotes for each of these. So you can look at things like AI needs the data, and we have people just saying it requires a lot of human data. For machines to think, they need to analyze and base their decisions on data, right? People understand that these AI systems need a lot of data to function. We see people responding that it requires these multiple connected sources, right? It's on their phones, it's on the internet, it's on every device. The AI knows what I'm doing at all times. It's cross-linked and brought together. So we see participants saying things like they can use this to take innocuous information from the internet to gain insight into the lives of people and reveal things. And so it just allows information to be gathered and collated. It also means that this data is available. We have a participant here saying they're afraid there will be some glitch in the system and all my information will be open to a stranger, or a big leak of data that could put this data out into the open space of the internet. And worse, they know that it's not just mistakes or accidental data leaks, but it could be available to hackers, right? Hackers will understand there are these huge amounts of data, and these are some of the concerns that people have for this first data at risk theme. Our second theme is highly personal. This isn't just collecting lots and lots of data. It's not just scraping Wikipedia and Reddit, but respondents understood that this was from highly personal data that can be used to develop these precise personal insights. So we see people describing it'll brazenly violate personal life. It'll collect our words and our actions down to the smallest detail. And we also understand not just that it's collecting personal data about you, but it's going to reveal personal insights. It's going to reveal you. It's going to create a database and predict things that may interest us, right? It's going to pull in these understandings of ourselves. Sometimes people thought that was in ways that we might not even understand ourselves, something we've heard commonly across privacy research. This will be used potentially by companies to influence decisions and behaviors. Large corporations will ruthlessly use AI to market their products or services to a wider demographic. It'll be impossible to resist the advertising. Our third theme is without consent. Overall, and you can see all of the numbers for this by country in the paper, all 4 of these themes came up in every country that we looked at data from. This one was the most uncommon of the 4 themes, but respondents did feel and sometimes mentioned that scaled personal data collection occurs without meaningful consent, sometimes without awareness, and data provision is a requirement to get access to these services. So effectively, if you want to use these services, you must give out your data, and really, in many cases, you can't use a service that might be AI-powered without sort of using that AI part of it. The AI is just a piece of it, and you sort of must do it. People's data will be invaded, whether they know and give their consent or not. Invasion of privacy by spying on me without my consent. It's beyond the majority of what people know. Companies will use our data and we won't even know, right? These ideas that we can't even really give consent because most people don't know that this is happening. that useful features will be available in exchange for the disclosure of personal information, that it requires people to reveal themselves. Our final theme is state and surveillance. And so while we've talked a bit already about corporations and using those insights for capitalist reasons, our respondents also identified many ways that AI could be used by governments to support surveillance and monitoring. So AI conducts surveillance. AI will be the ultimate spy. I feel like I'm being monitored at all times. It's like a device with eyes and ears that is watching you 24/7 and storing your personal information. AI is omnipresent. It's there all the time. It's on all the time. It'll be monitoring everything. AI identifies people, and so right to ideas of facial recognition, being able to automatically identify more accurately the individuals. And AI serves state purposes. The use of machines to determine a person's risk to the country, details about all citizens will be collected. It's possible to spy on the population even more easily than now. So overall, these are the four themes we saw with sort of sub-descriptions of what we saw in those themes. And in the last couple of minutes I have, I want to sort of frame what we discussed in the paper as a few takeaways from this work. Again, there's not really clear hypotheses here. We weren't testing something. We were exploring what people were thinking about AI, and with awareness that this may change over time. But our first takeaway is that people had overall really thoughtful responses. The narrative, the language we saw here was aligned with popular press, it was aligned with expert opinion, it was aligned with policy briefs. You know, there are of course people who had sort of vague and fuzzy concepts. These are open-ended responses. We weren't asking them about a list of things. We weren't testing their knowledge of these concepts. But we saw really thoughtful understanding about what AI is doing and sort of these main themes that are not contradictory, they make sense, and they align with many of the concerns that people have. We see this both as a way to say, you know, we see in a lot of privacy research, people don't understand things, right? Whether it's encrypted email or something else. You know, we've seen these throughout the talks today. This is one where people really do seem to be developing, at least at the broad levels, a sense of what AI is doing with their data and what it needs to function. Which means that we believe we can engage people with solutions. We think this is a great moment for civic participation because people are not completely uninformed. They do have a good sense of what AI might be doing and some of these basics of what it needs to function and to be successful in ways that it's already being used. And so whether we're building technology to sort of prevent some of these concerns that they have, whether we're thinking about more educational efforts, whether we're thinking about participatory design work, we should bring people into those conversations because they have an interest in AI and they have a pretty good base level, pretty good mental models that align with the ways we as experts might be thinking about some of these questions. We also tell our product developers at Google and our product teams, as well as sort of the community, we think this is a great way to look at these four concerns as a roadmap for when we're developing AI systems. If you think through these concerns as the things that might limit people's use of an AI system or their comfort with an AI system, how are we going to use these themes to say, well, you know what, here's where you actually do have consent to turn this on, or to have it be on but not necessarily have access to all of your data. Here are ways where you can say, you know what, these are the limits we have on the government use of this type of AI system. These are ways to sort of address the concerns that people have. And finally, although I didn't get much into it today in the talk, though there is more in the paper, 22% of our respondents thought they would have more privacy. In the open-ended responses, about 12% said something free-form, unprompted, about sort of how AI might help fight hackers or might build new crypto systems and other solutions that they proposed. And I think this is a great moment where we can leverage this. This isn't just an optimistic halo effect, right? People are very excited about AI. They were not as excited about AI with privacy. But where are the moments where we can get them excited about AI as a way to protect their privacy or as a tool to help them? So that's just everything on one slide that you don't have time to see. And so with that, I would love to take questions for a minute or two. Thank you so much.